Hey, welcome back to Tech Talk. I'm here with Ken Knapton, and I just really privileged to have you here. Ken, as you may already know, is an analyst for IDC. He is also a board member for AIM, the Association of Information Management, as well as the author, and we'll be talking about this today, of Unveiling Tech Debt. Ken, good to have you.
Wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. You know, I read this book and I got a lot out of it, but there are some components in here which are absolutely groundbreaking for the average CIO, for the business owner as well. And it has a lot to do with what I would simply call the challenge of making use of resources and getting through a lot of the challenges associated with cost and delivery of product. Yeah. How would you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a challenge, I think, trying to balance the needs of the organization against budgetary restrictions, personnel restrictions, resource restrictions, right? And often, I actually mentioned this in the book. One of the CIOs I worked with, his favorite phrase was "kick the can." Right? Let's kick the can, kick down the right. So often, these other things get prioritized over maintenance. Right? It's the way that I like to look at it is the difference between gas and oil in a car. Right? You keep putting gas in the car and it'll keep going.
Right.
But at some point, if you're not changing the oil, the car's just going to stop.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's why I look at tech debt as the oil, right? It's the oil change. It's focusing on the maintenance, on keeping things running so that when you put gas in the car, it'll go, right? And it'll go faster and farther, right?
What do you think is the barrier to really maintaining that car? I mean, beyond simply adding the lubricants and the resources, I guess what I'm getting at is that communication between you and the people that work with you. I think that's one thing that you really do a good job in this book is discuss coming to terms with the realities of tech debt and how you address it. That language of sorts, right?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the problems is that there's not this common language between IT and the rest of the business, right? And so when people at the rest of the business are thinking about what do we need to do to generate more revenue, to grow our business, to scale, to do whatever, right? They're thinking about all these business initiatives and the things they need from their technology to do that. What they're not thinking about are any of the decisions that may have been made or maintenance things that have been overlooked that may be inhibitors to achieving those goals, right? And so the problem is this lack of communication between the IT organization, who knows all of that intimately well, and the side of the business that's saying, here's all the new things we want to go do and all the new areas we want to go after and focus on. And so we have to bridge that gap. What we have to do is help enable that discussion so that the IT folks can reach out and say, look, we're part of this. We're fully bought into the strategy of the organization. And in order to get there, here are some things that we're going to have to fix, right? These are things that are inhibitors. And often it's things that are behind the scenes that people don't even know about.
To me, it feels like it sounds like a challenge of trust. It's quite often the willingness to listen within your organization, to take into account the educated perspective of the people who work for you. At least that's been what I've seen. And I think you reflect that in the book as well.
Yeah, you know, I find that to be a sad irony within almost. I don't want to speak in extreme terms. I won't say every organization, but many organizations where I've worked, that type of philosophy has shown up. Where, you think back on the Steve Jobs comment, right?
Yeah.
We hire smart people and let them be smart.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to get out of the way, let them go do what we hired them to do.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what we often find in organizations is that the people in the line of the business are looking at IT as the department of no. Right? No, we can't do that.
Right.
No, we can't get them. And they're always the people holding back the company. But that's not accurate. Right? And again, it comes because of this philosophy that you're addressing here, which is this idea that we have to have trust in each other.
Yeah.
And so when the business is saying we want to go do this, they need to listen to the people in IT who are saying, hey, that's great, but here are some things we have to do first, or in order to get there, we have to address some things. And right now, in a lot of times, I think that trust doesn't exist. And when they hear, we have to go upgrade a server, or we have to go install, new versions of the operating system, or whatever it might be, right? Whatever these things are behind the scenes, what the line of business hears is, no, right? No, we can't do that.
Right.
When that's not what they're saying. They're not saying we can't do it. They're saying we have to position ourselves differently from our tech stack perspective in order to do what you're asking to have done.
Yeah, no, I get that. This theme of trust and this theme of will collides with the common theme of, what is good and what is bad. What's a healthy behavior within an organization? When you look at the book and you wrap your brain around the concept, the challenge is really, is tech debt good or bad? Is it good or bad? And I think it's really both. I mean, you don't want to starve yourself of tech debt. That's not the goal, is it?
No. So, and I love that you brought this up, because it's one of the key reasons that I wrote the book. This is one of the key factors that kind of was a catalyst for me as I was thinking through the problems I was trying to solve as a CIO with this organization. This was one of the problems I was trying to solve. And again, I think you articulated it very well. Historically, when we think about tech debt, when we look at the term tech debt, where it came from, how it's been used in the IT world, almost all the time, it was seen as a negative thing, right? Tech debt is something that it's problems that we're facing because software developers had to make some bad decision because they were trying to rush to get something out the door or meet a deadline or whatever, right? So it was always based on those darn IT guys making stupid decisions that are now holding us back.
Right.
That's not how I define tech debt.
No.
So as I was putting the book together and putting together the thoughts around how to address tech debt, it occurred to me that tech debt is not always based on a bad decision. It's based on decisions.
Right.
But it's not always a bad decision. Sometimes we make a decision. Say, for example, as a CIO, I would say, look, we're going to use this particular vendor. And we're going to base our tech stack around that vendor. That's going to be a core piece of what we do. And then maybe 3, 4, 10 years down the line, that vendor says, hey, we're going to sell to one of our competitors. We're going to merge, right? All of a sudden, that particular vendor changes as far as how they're being used within our environment, either from a monetary perspective or from their feature set perspective, or maybe they go out of business, right? That wasn't a bad decision back then.
Right.
It was the right decision.
Yeah.
Now, it's tech debt, right? So that's a long way of answering your question, which is tech debt is neither good nor bad, right? And in the book, I talk about this concept of tech debt leverage, which is very similar to financial debt leverage.
Yes.
Financial debt is neither good nor bad. Sometimes you increase your financial debt leverage in order to go achieve some strategic outcome.
Right.
And over time, you pay down your financial debt so that you're less leveraged from a financial perspective. Tech debt is exactly the same. And it is not a realistic goal to have 0 as your target for tech debt, right?
Yeah.
You're never going to have zero tech debt.
I noticed that in the book you mentioned explicitly that it's important to make payments.
Yeah, yeah, and so you have to decide what's our range?
Yeah.
Where as a company, where do we want to be from a tech debt leverage perspective? Just like your CFO has to decide where do we want to be from a financial debt leverage perspective.
Right.
And then once you set that target, and it has to be realistic, that target is not going to be zero. Because if you're trying to always be at zero tech debt, you're not going to be meeting the needs of the business. You're not going to be focusing on other things, right? So you have to decide that range that's
That you're
acceptable.
comfortable with the debt.
Exactly. What is it that you as a company, right, that you as an organization, what are you comfortable with as far as tech debt? And then it's not a bad thing, right? When you talk about, hey, we have 10% tech debt and our goal is 10 to 15%, then great. It's not a negative.
Wow. So, in your experience, sometimes approaching boards and discussing the realities of tech debt is not a fun thing to do.
Right.
Let's talk about that. How does one come to terms with the board or with the decision makers to let them know that they've got a problem?
Yeah, so I think it's a similar discussion that you would have with a CISO around cybersecurity, right? And I think the challenge is that we want to make sure that we are always being transparent with the board. It's really becoming more and more important for boards to really understand what's happening within the organization. And when you start talking about things like cybersecurity, tech debt, oftentimes these are not their areas of expertise, right? And so you come in, you give a presentation, and it looks like everything's great,
right,
even though I'm telling them that we have to fix all these things.
Right.
But in my experience, what they hear is, we have some challenges. You're the IT person. You've got it, right? That's your job. Go do your job.
Yeah.
And that's not always the message that we need to leave with them.
Right.
Sometimes the message is, we have some problems, and yes, they're fixable, but we need these resources, or we need this focus, or this whole list of priorities that either the board or the executive team is laying out for the company. We're not going to be able to do them because we have to address this first, right?
Yeah.
And
that speaks to me as a behavioral shift as well. It's not just a software challenge. Like, you're not arguing out this software is not doing the job and we're finding ourselves frustrated at trying to maintain it, but sometimes it's, how are we going to address these issues, and are we all on the same page?
Exactly. That's right. And you have to speak in terms that they understand, right? Boards aren't stupid. They're smart people, right?
Yeah.
They're business people.
Certainly.
Many of them are not technical people.
Right.
They're not technological, right? They're not cybersecurity people. And so you have to bridge that gap and speak in terms that they understand. And so when we start talking about things like tech debt leverage, we're speaking in terms that they already understand financial debt leverage. So we're talking in terms that they understand. The challenge is that we have to help them understand that this is inhibiting to our business. The goals, the strategic goals that you have and that you're setting for our organization, we're all fully behind them. But we have some things we have to fix if we're going to get there.
Yeah. What you're speaking to is so important. It's entering into the room with a vision of how you see things can be.
Right.
Right. And I think when you address these challenges to whomever, it's got to be one where you're not just simply highlighting the problems. I think that's where a lot of the boardroom arguments fail. If all you're going to bring me is challenges among what you can't seem to resolve, where am I going?
Right.
And what you're saying is, no, this is where we can be, and this is how we need to get there. And that's where the trust belongs.
Yeah, exactly. And it is all about building that trust, right? Just like you said. And I think that historically, IT people, it's just second nature to us, right? We just know. So we walk in and we say, hey, we have all these challenges, we have all these problems, we have all this stuff that's holding us back, and we assume that everybody else in the room understands that means we have to fix all that.
Okay.
Right? But that's not always the message that comes across. Again, I think what's often heard in the executive team or in the boardroom is these guys are busy.
Yeah.
They're doing stuff.
Yeah.
Keep doing it, right? Go.
Yeah.
Go fix
Take
the problems.
that hill.
Yeah, that's right. That's your world. Go fix it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We're going to focus on this. You get that done. And we have to bridge that gap. We have to help them understand that we're not in a silo. We're not off just solving these technical problems. These are part of our business. It's part of how we achieve the goals that you're setting.
Yeah.
Right? And it's more together than it is apart, right?
Yeah.
It's not a silo.
Excellent. Obviously, AI's taken off, and the landscape of the modern infrastructure is shifting hugely as it relates to security, as it relates to infrastructure itself,
Yep.
platforms, human resources.
Yep.
How do you see tech debt influencing our future concerns as they relate to AI?
Yeah. So I mean, AI is obviously huge, right? It's everywhere. Everybody is scrambling to make use of AI in one form or another. And there's lots of obvious challenges. You can go do a Google search about AI and all of the power consumption and all of the CPU consumption and all that it needs to do its thing.
Huge.
It is. It's huge. And so there are a lot of hurdles that you have to overcome in order to actually leverage AI within an enterprise. Not the least of which have to do with privacy and IP protection.
Yes.
Right? Protection of your own data. Don't put your data out into this nebulous world. Right? So all those things you have to understand. And I'm not setting any of that aside. That's all important.
Okay.
From the perspective of tech debt, one of the most interesting aspects, I think, of AI when we're talking about tech debt is data tech debt. Right? And so, and again, we're thinking about tech debt in new ways now. And one of the new ways is that data itself can be debt.
Yes.
Data itself can hold you back. So as people are thinking about how do we leverage AI, they go out and they look at the AI models. We're going to use OpenAI, we're going to use Olama, what are we going to use, right? And so they're looking at that level. They're trying to figure out how to frame the questions, how to frame their prompts, which all of these are critical things when it comes to AI. But what they're often not thinking about is the data set underneath that model. Either the LLM upon which it was trained, or more importantly, their own data set. Right? So one of the most common, and I'm sure you're aware of this, and you guys are heavily involved in this through CRNT, one of the common ways that people are implementing AI is through RAG, right? Which is the acronym for how you take a large language model and then you add your own data set into that, right? It's augmented, retrieval augmented, right, in that environment.
Yes.
Well, if your data isn't clean and you're adding garbage into your, garbage in, garbage
Good
out.
in, good
right?
out. Yeah.
So you can put a whole bunch of garbage in your AI model and then ask it a bunch of questions and get a whole bunch of seemingly great answers, but they're really garbage.
That is huge. And truthfully, we are dealing with clients who are really looking to privatize and segregate their LLMs to create their own environments of intelligence with common nuances and vernaculars associated with whatever industry they may be in.
Yeah.
And it's so true that the pollution of data can happen so easily.
Yep.
Data truly is a huge component to tech debt.
Yeah, it is. And it, again, my definition of tech debt is anything in your tech stack that's holding you back from achieving your strategic goals.
Right.
And so if you have determined, and you as an overall organization, that AI is going to help us achieve our strategic goals, it's going to help us do more with
Right.
fewer people,
Right.
right? Because we can throw a question at the AI and we don't need all the analysts, the AI can analyze it.
Mm-hmm.
Great, that's your strategic vision. And in order to implement that, you have to have clean data. And you have to have a solid data set
Yeah.
that is going to provide the answers that you're looking for, right, to the questions you're going to be asking. And if you don't have that clean data set, which right now a lot of people don't,
Yeah.
because companies are very, very good at retaining data.
Yeah.
They're horrible at deleting data.
Yeah.
And they're even worse at cleaning data,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so data has a shelf life.
Yeah.
Think about customer contact information,
Yeah.
right? How often do people change phone numbers? How often do they change email addresses? How often do they change companies? So all this data that you're storing about someone, over time, it becomes stale. And if you're not keeping it fresh, keeping it updated, keeping it current, you can throw that into an AI
Mm-hmm.
and ask for the answers, and you're getting all these great answers back, but it's going to be data you can't do anything with.
No, it'll be stale.
Yeah.
It'll be stale. So, one of the components in the book is measuring tech debt.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so this again, I said earlier that there was a couple of reasons that were really the catalyst for writing the book. This is the other one. As a CIO, I was looking for a way to measure our tech debt. How do I know how much tech debt we have? How do I know how leveraged we are?
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't find any metrics from an enterprise perspective that would help me to do that. Everything that I found about tech debt, from measuring tech debt, all had to do with custom software development. How many bugs per lines of code, right? Those kinds of metrics. So the model that I came up with my team, I got my team together and we talked through this. The model that we came up with was there are 6 elements that you will measure across your entire organization. So you break down your tech stack, technology by technology, and you can break it down however you want. You can keep it high level, say our ERP system is one of those, or you can break it down into, the libraries that are pulled in to your custom developed or whatever, right? So you break down the technology however you want to as an organization.
Okay.
But in each of those technologies, you then are going to assess 6 different areas. And you're going to scale them or measure them on a scale of 0 to 5. And so, and all of this is laid out in the book. That I actually lay out the math, the algorithm. It's all there. I don't keep any of it proprietary.
No.
So you measure it all and you normalize that information. So then you have each individual technology, and you're looking at things like, so these 6 areas are things like, how supportable is it? How much time does our IT team or our help desk team, right? How much time do they put into helping people use this or helping them through problems, right? How supportable? How stable is it? How often does it go down, right? We have metrics on that.
Right.
Uptime, things like that. And then you're looking at things like how long is the usable life, the lifespan. So again, going back to this concept we talked about earlier of a vendor that maybe gets purchased or there's a merger that occurs, or maybe the vendor just says, this is the end of life date for this technology, right? Microsoft, hey, this is our end of life date for the operating system, right?
Yeah.
So you have to build that into your plans. How much longer can we use this before we have to upgrade it or switch to something else? Anyway, I'm not going to go through all 6,
Sure.
because they're all outlined there. But we have 6 very distinct areas that you measure. Measure them on a scale of 0 to 5, and again, the measurements of how you determine that's all laid out in here as well. Then you can normalize that into an actual number. You can say, hey, our ERP system is 10% leveraged from a tech debt perspective.
Right.
But our financial system, 80% leveraged.
Yeah.
Right. So now you can look technology by technology and start to see where you need to be putting some effort.
Yes.
You can also take all of your tech stack together, normalize that down to a single number, and that tells you what is your tech debt leverage across this entire organization.
That really expresses what you need to express in a way that gives a real clear view of what needs to be shifted and what doesn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It drives the prioritization discussions, it drives the budget discussions, and again, it bridges that gap now to where when you walk into the boardroom, to the executive team, wherever it is, you can have that discussion and you can show the visual, right? This is where we are today. And when I say that we can't achieve this strategic goal until something is solved, this is what I'm talking about. This is the thing that has to be solved.
I see.
And I can come back next time and show you the progress that we've made, right? As opposed to talking in nebulous terms around, we have a lot of things that are holding us back, right?
I think it's brilliant. I think that does away with a lot of the confusion and frustration that would emanate from personalities and selective behavior, having some kind of a formal process. That's fantastic. And this is all within the book.
It's all there.
Right on.
It's all there, yeah.
Ken, with all of the doom and gloom that people think about tech debt, give us a good example.
Yeah, thank you. So, as I said a little bit before, tech debt is often seen as a negative thing, right? It's always, tech debt is just this bad, ugly, it's the elephant in the room that we don't want to talk about.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is that when you think about it from a tech debt leverage perspective, it helps you to make decisions. And just like, again, with financial debt, you might say, hey, we're going to do this. We know it's going to increase our financial debt, but we're doing it for a specific reason.
Right.
Tech debt's exactly the same. And in fact, I was working for a company once where we were rolling out this large enterprise system, and we were on a deadline. I mean, there were some key regulatory constraints here that were requiring us to hit certain deadlines.
Right.
And through the course of this, we came to realize that there was one key feature that we were not going to be able to replace with the system that was there. It wasn't at parity. And so you always want to be at parity when you replace something.
Certainly.
Because you don't want to take away features from someone else, right? But we talked about it. We said, look, we recognize that this new system is not completely at parity, but because of these other reasons, we're going to go ahead and put it in play. And so we did that. Now, essentially what we were doing is saying we are going to implement something that we know has tech debt, because we immediately have to go back and implement this thing that's not there right now. So we put it in place knowing that we were creating some tech debt for us. But we did that because it was strategically important to the company.
Yeah.
It was the right thing to do.
Yes.
And yes, it was going to cause some heartache, and we had to proactively address that. But we did it knowingly, right? And that's the key. Your tech debt usually accumulates in the background because of decisions that are made that the IT team either isn't telling the executives that, hey, this is going to cause problems, right? It's just happening in the background.
Yeah.
But we did this knowingly, and again, we went back and fixed it afterwards and got rid of the tech debt.
See, that's a reflection of our previous point, which is that these things, when bringing them to the audience that need to hear it, need to be also given the end game.
Yeah.
View of success and what that really looks like. And
Yeah,
I think
it's a
that's
partnership,
it's a
right?
wonderful
We're in this together. It's not IT and everybody else. We're all in this together. So this breaks down silos.
I love that. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I am very grateful for the opportunity to talk with you today. Certainly the book is hugely enlightening. And I recommend everybody, especially if you yourself are in a situation where you're looking at the next 6 months, next year, next 3 years, 5 years, and you're trying to determine where you need to be, and tech debt is certainly one of the components, take a read. This is a fantastic piece. So we've talked about a lot of things. What's next?
That's a great question. There's a lot here, right? And I would throw that back at you, right? How can CRNT help with what's next?
Well, we would be certainly excited to do so. Right within the book itself, there is a chart of sorts which helps define these layers, these 6 particular areas, which provide clarity to the formulaic understanding of tech debt. CRNT is here to help you in that capacity if you would like resources to help develop, identify, determine, and resolve this path. Certainly we have talented folks here at CRNT, and also Ken yourself is available to assist in this capacity too as well. So again, thank you so much. This is phenomenal. Really appreciate your time and your effort.
Yeah, thanks for the time. It's been a fun conversation.
Thank you. And thanks again. We'll see you next time at Tech Talk.